Hey guys, welcome to Catholic in America. Today we are talking about the scripture passage that says, "Call no man your father."
If you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe.
So these three fathers will tell you what Jesus meant by that.
All right, welcome back to Catholic in America. Guys, great episode today. I'm joined by Father Doug Martin, Father Tom Dillon. I'm Father Michael Nixon. And Father. I'm going to keep saying that all over and over again because the scripture passage that we hear a lot, you've probably heard this before, is from Matthew 23. So we're going to talk about that, where Jesus says, "Call no man father," and why the heck are priests called father as well? So,
well, and being a married priest, and there's an episode on that if you'd like to see, but being a married priest, I have one of my children that calls me father. So
exactly.
I'm like getting it twice now.
Absolutely. So you were just disobeying the Lord left and right. Yeah. So I'll read the verse here. This is from Matthew chapter 23, and we're going to talk about, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the priesthood and about this title of father and why the church uses that. And see if it corresponds to what Jesus is saying. So in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, during this denunciation of the scribes and the Pharisees, Jesus is speaking to the crowds about these scribes and Pharisees, about the religious leaders, and basically the ways that you're called to follow what they say, but not what they do. And then talking about how they tie up heavy burdens, place them on people's shoulders, never lift a finger to move them. All their works are performed to be seen. They widen their phylacteries, lengthen their tassels. They love places of honor, and greetings in marketplaces, and the salutation rabbi, which means teacher. So, rabbi, as for you, do not be called rabbi, do not be called teacher. You have but one teacher, and you are all brothers. And this is when they quote, "Call no one on earth your father, if you have one Father in heaven. Do not be called master, you have one master, the Messiah. And the greatest among you must be your servant." So, Father, that's your
Father.
So Doug or Tom, Mike. How have you heard this brought up as far as people struggling with this or hearing this passage? You grew up in a Protestant family, so I'm sure it's come up.
So not so much in my family, but in my friend groups and some of the guys that I used to hang out with. Yeah, I mean it's brought up in the literal sense of the verse. I mean and it's also brought up not really in context either. Let's be honest about this. When you just quote just a line out of the scriptures, sometimes it's ripped and taken out of context.
Oh, come on! I love Bible darts. Take a little scripture passage and just throw it at someone.
Throw it at someone. Yeah. So
I gave a little bit of the context. So I read a little bit ahead of it, and in a sense that to me kind of almost changes a little bit of it, but just the idea that to call no man father, and it was always amazing to me that this applied to priests, but not to earthly dads either, even though it says that. But just brought up as a way to kind of throw that dart at Catholics, and to kind of, what it does is it's supposed to cast some aspersion on us that we're doing something that we shouldn't do. And so obviously it's not true. But hear it quite a bit and just quoted, no real context given to it, no comment even. It's almost like a mic drop. You're supposed to call no man father, and you're done. Right.
And so that proves the point. Done, over with, but hear it quite a bit.
Well, Tom, have you?
Have I heard this? Yes. It's within the context of the passage. The passage is very obviously talking about hypocrisy and seeking place.
Well, we'll get there, Tom.
So what am I supposed to be answering?
No, I think about this in terms of like sometimes people who maybe have grown up Catholic or and then someone confronts them with this, and maybe some of our viewers maybe who grew up Catholic, and then all of a sudden says, you're not supposed to call any man father. Why do you call your priest father? It says right here in the Bible, and it's kind of like, it seems pretty on the nose.
Right.
And so just recognizing that now they're usually not like going up to someone who has a teacher and be like, you're not supposed to call anyone your teacher.
Never heard it happen at a university.
Don't ever call that person a teacher. So it's only in this particular thing.
Correct.
But it is interesting how much, because I think it speaks to the wider aspect of religious authority, of where we place our trust, of where authority comes from, Also there's all sorts of aspects to it that I think are really important. But I want to talk a little bit today about the priesthood, because I think this gives a good intro into this, and the fact that we are called Father within the Catholic Church, and the reason for that is rooted in the Scriptures. It's not something that's divorced from that. And maybe even share a little bit of our stories too, of becoming priests. So recognizing that if you've heard that before, call no man Father, I think on the face, and I'll let you go ahead, Father Tom. What would your response be if someone's like, I thought it said in the Bible you can call no man Father?
The context of the whole passage. The context of the whole passage is Jesus talking about people who are seeking places of honor and people who are seeking honor for the sake of honor, but not actually fulfilling their role. He's not telling people that they can't be teachers. Actually, St. Paul in the New Testament directly says and tells people that there's a function and role in the church. One of the gifts of the church is roles of teachers. And he actually says teachers should be paid twice.
Yeah.
If you remember that. As he says, good teachers should be paid twice, which I'm a teacher right now at John Paul II.
So some of our public educators are like, amen, brother.
Yeah, exactly. So teachers should be paid twice. So the context of what Jesus is talking about, and that's why the real literal interpretation of the Scriptures is always which is in the Hebrew, the Peshat. So the full context of the literal is, what is the passage actually saying, brass tacks on the nose, like the surface layers. The first layer Jesus is talking about, and that's why the context is important. Right. He's talking about people who are using authority and abusing authority and not using their authority for the sake of others, but they're using it for their own glorification. And this is why Jesus is being very critical, and that's why he's saying don't seek. And parallel to his other parable where he says don't seek the best place at the table.
Right.
Seek the last place at the table. That way you can be raised up. If you seek the best place, you're going to be lowered down. And so it's the glorification and seeking of titles. It's the same thing. PhD. What does that stand for? Do you remember?
I don't. No.
I think it's.
I don't have one. So
So
If I had one, I might know.
yeah, I've heard. When you're seeking titles for the sake of titles, this is the context of what Jesus is talking about. And then likewise, we have the words of St. Paul in the New Testament as well, where he says to the people, I believe it's of Corinth, he says, you have many guardians, many protectors in Christ. You only have one Father, referencing himself. He said, be like me. And so
I became your father in faith.
It calls Timothy,
my beloved son.
So Jesus is very obviously not doing away with the role and vocation of fatherhood.
Yes, praise God for that. And I think that's important too, because in a sense, it's one of those. There's in a sense a hyperbolic kind of aspect of it that Jesus is making a strong statement in order to make a point, and the point is what we need to hold fast to. And it only comes out against calling Catholic priests fathers. There's no other context where this is used.
It's never been used any other way.
For masters of divinity, being every basically every Protestant pastor in the world, or at least the United States, has a master's of divinity, and he says, "Call no man master." So we're out there. Everyone has teachers, and says, "Call no man teacher." So everyone has fathers as well. So recognizing that, just on the nose of it. What do you call your dad? I call my dad Dad and Father, and those things. I'm not violating what Jesus said. Jesus calls Abraham, refers to him as Father Abraham. So anyway, so sort of recognizing that on the face of it. So then getting back to the priesthood, I think this is maybe the for us kind of where our conversation could go today, because having priests within the church, we've had an episode about why about married priests, and we have Father Doug, who is actually married. He was an Episcopalian, ordained in another denomination that became Catholic, and him and his lovely wife are now part of the Catholic Church, and he's an ordained priest in the Catholic Church. So welcome.
Validly, thank you.
Validly ordained. And Father Tom and I are not married, and we're all priests, but we get called Father, and there's something about that. Maybe we could just kind of break it down to this: the first time, if you can remember, the first time that you were called Father. Yeah. Like what did that mean? What did that mean for you? I'll go first, and I can say this for myself. And you have the double experience of having your kids and being a priest. But I remember I was just ordained a priest, and we had like a reception at my home parish, and it was my first Mass. It was a beautiful time. My dad preached. My father preached. And it was really interesting. So the deacon, before he preaches, before he proclaims the gospel, he says, "Your blessing, Father." So he gets the blessing from the priest and then goes and proclaims the gospel. So it's really interesting. My dad saying to me, "Your blessing, Father," and so me giving him that blessing, that priestly blessing. It had nothing to do with my authority over him because of my age, obviously, because of my rank in life. Obviously, he's my dad. Because of my wisdom, he's much more wise than me. But the fact that I'm a priest, that there was something within that. So I remember that moment, and so my dad preaching, which was really powerful, and he did a great job, and he's a great preacher. But then afterwards, we had a reception, and I just remember, I was kind of sitting at one point, and we're kind of clearing out, and this little girl with this family in Tallahassee, she just goes, "Bye, Father." I just remember that moment, just kind of like struck me, like, oh my gosh, like wow, there's something profound about this this reality, that I obviously don't deserve, and but that I'm not now stepping into as a priest. So that's kind of what I remember as the first time getting called that.
Yeah, I think that probably I remember the ordination day, obviously, when we got ordained, I remember being called Father, and it was just, my initial response was just kind of awkward, and just like, "Ooh, this is kind of a little bit weird." But I remember the first time that I remember like yourself, I remember the first time that it really impacted me. It was in the first year of being a priest, and I was at a conference, and I was hearing confessions of young people, of teenagers at this conference, and I hadn't heard confessions up until that point. It was a couple of months in the priesthood, and all of a sudden I had one confessee who came in, teenage girl, and came in and just like bared her heart out. And it'd been years since she'd been coming to confession. And just so you know, we can talk generally about confessions further, as long as we don't reveal the details for those who are listening. So I'm not going to talk about anyone's.
Yes.
But I remember in the context of this confession, she had parent troubles and had a lot of father issues and father problems, and really shared her soul. And was, I think, and she told me that this was kind of the first time that she had a really powerful experience in confession. And so I remember like having this really beautiful moment as I was leading her to God the Father, in this moment where I really felt that the Spirit was really working in her, and I actually saw a transformation that was happening at that time as God was breaking open her heart. So I mean, it was just the next confessee comes in, and you're like, okay, keep going forward. But I'll never forget, because at the very end of that trip, as I was about to get on my bus to go home, this girl broke away, and I didn't even see her. She broke away from a crowd across the way, came up, and gave me a big, huge hug. And like had tears in her eyes. She's like, "Thank you, Father."
Wow.
And then ran off.
Wow.
So like in that moment, I'm still tearing up a little bit. Just this beautiful, profound moment of just recognizing, and I recognized like in prayer later, I was just like, what God told me, He's like, "You are the Father to the lost." And like just this beautiful moment of God using the priest and using me as a priest, and to be a father to those who had poor fathers.
Yeah, I got several stories, and I'll try and stay brief about it. But first time being called father, actually was as a priest, wasn't as a dad. But I remember actually being called. Well, no, actually it was before. Yeah, we had Micah before I was actually ordained a priest. So just remember them handing me my son for the first time and getting to hold him and say, "You're a father," and you're like, it hits you, yeah, you are a father, and so, and the ontological change that happens there, that I can no longer at that moment go back to being not father.
Yeah.
So there's something real about that, and it didn't just happen in having a child. I mean, that's what happens to us in priesthood as well. When those hands are laid on us, there's an ontological change in each of us that we're father now. I remember the one of the first times having this. We had, as an Episcopal priest, I was called father as well, and I can remember us having a 94-year-old man in our congregation who had only come into the church 3 years before that, only became Christian, and was confirmed at 91 or 92 years old. I'll never forget him coming up to me and asking me he said, "May I have your blessing, Father?" And just thinking, man, this guy shouldn't be calling me that. I'm 30 years old. You know what? I mean, so just the reality of that and feeling that. I think this time around as a Catholic priest, though, probably the most profound time was when Bishop Bill Wack kneeled in front of me and said, "Your blessing, Father." And to give that first priestly blessing and to be able to give it to him and to be called that was just the reality of the situation for me and the beauty of that situation. But there's one other time that was really very special to me. It's a little sad, but very special to me. As a youth minister, I was a youth minister for 10 years in the Catholic Church before coming to our diocese and being ordained a priest. And I had a note written to me there's this retreat that you go on where you write notes to people, the people who are serving on it and the people who are actually the retreatants. And so sometimes they'll write to you. And so one of the girls that I had taken to it, who was one of our leaders, and she was giving a talk, she wrote me a note. And in the note it said, thank you so much for all your time you've given to us. And she said, you've been more of a father to me than my own father. And it's a little sad that her father had not been, but just that she viewed me that way was a very touching thing. And I didn't hold the title of father at that point as far as like for her in any way, but to have that conferred onto me by someone was very touching.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know we're on holy ground when we get invited to those places with people. So I want to talk, we're going to take a quick break, and I want to come back and talk a little bit more about the fatherhood of God, that in a sense we get to live in that grace as God's beloved sons who are called to be father-like to others, but also too just the gift of the priesthood that we get to participate in and maybe gives people insights into our lives as priests. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hey guys, thanks for checking out Catholic in America. I'm Father Michael Nixon, and I like to party.
And I am Father Tom Dillon, priest here in the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee. I think I have the longest hair in probably the state, and I too like to party. I like whiskey and cigars.
Father Doug Martin. I'm also a priest here in the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee, and I'm married and roll tide.
Oh my goodness. Yes, sir. I was okay with the being married part, but the whole tide thing. In Catholic in America, we engage the intersection between faith and culture.
Tune in every week because no topic is out of bounds.
We want to thank you so much for supporting this show by watching it, by liking, sharing, and subscribing. How else can they support the show?
You can also become a patron on Patreon and support us financially.
So if you support us, there's all kinds of swag. There's t-shirts, there's coffee mugs, or maybe bumper stickers. I don't know, maybe we could come up with a wig from Father Tom.
Father Tom wig would go a long way. So thanks for your support. God bless y'all, and check us out next time on Catholic in America. Welcome back to Catholic in America. We're talking about the scripture passage that says, call no man father, and our own role as spiritual fathers, as priests. And so just the reality of that.
Yeah, I have another story, but this is a little different. So when I first came into the Catholic Church, I was called to the Diocese of Rockford in Rockford, Illinois, and was there going through some examinations to see if they wanted to invite me into their diocese. And one of the local priests was hosting me. And so while I was there, he asked me to speak to his RCIA class. And as I was speaking to them, before I started, he introduced me as, Father Doug Martin. He's an Episcopal priest. He's considering becoming a Catholic priest. And so, he's going to speak to us today. And so he's more of a father than I am. And in front of them, I couldn't take it. In front of them, I said, don't ever say that again. That's because you are a father. Okay, so you haven't had a child. You're a father. And you're more of a father right now, or just as much of a father as I am, because you have more children than I do at the moment. You have more responsibility than I do at this very moment, because I have one child, and you have many here. So please don't ever denigrate yourself in that way. And so I've always tried to tell priests not to do that, because there's sometimes that they're in their their zeal to be humble, and I appreciate that part of it, they'll make statements like that, like I'm not a father as much as you are, and it's not seeing the priesthood for what it is, and for what we're called to. We're fathers. I'm a double father because I have a child, but also because I'm a priest, and those two realities are very real to me, and I don't want any of my brother priests to think that someone's more of a father than they are, just because biologically speaking, they may not have had a child in that way. But the spiritual children that we give birth to is just phenomenal and amazing, and more than we could give birth to biologically.
Yeah. Well, so this verse speaks of you have one Father in heaven, God. And so in a sense, all fatherhood, and this is another line from St. Paul, where he talks about, I bend my knee to the Father, from whom all families under heaven take their name. So all fatherhood, all paternity is rooted in God. All family life is rooted in God as well. Yeah. So this revelation of God as Father, I think there's something really, really important about that. So for you all, and understand God as a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but particularly God as Father, how does that inform your faith or your own kind of living this out? And then obviously from there, the way that you're called to behave and live as someone who's called Father on a daily basis.
Yeah, my first encounter with God, where I was when I had kind of my conversion, because I'd stepped away from my faith for a couple of years. And I was in Rome, and I encountered God for the first time, and God revealed himself to me as Father. And it was only after my experience of community and authentic spirit in the context of community, which opened me up to that. But when God revealed himself and told me very clearly in prayer, it was like one of those really intense, powerful moments. And the majority of, at least I don't know about your guys' spiritual life, but mine, it's not as intense as those moments can sometimes be, those mountaintop experiences. But where God told me very clearly in prayer, he's like, Tommy, I am your Father. And like, I'd heard that before. Like, obviously, I knew that from Scripture, and I'd heard that before.
Kind of the concept of
it.
Yeah,
the concept of it. Yeah. I'd heard about God, the Father, but I had never, until God spoke to me in prayer and revealed himself as a Father and very clearly told me, I am your Father. He's like, and I will teach you how to be my son. That was another thing he told me. I was like, he's like, I want you to be a father. I don't know how to do that. He's like, I will teach you how to do that. So for me, like God the Father, I've always had a very strong connection to God the Father. In that sense, because also in the same sense, like in my priesthood and my ministry, like I'm called to generate life. I'm called to sow my seeds out into the world, and the seed which we spread as a priest in the church is the seed which is the Word. This is what Saint Justin Martyr and then later Irenaeus, but Justin Martyr talked about the logos spermaticos. We inseminate the Word. We send out the Word into the world. And that predominantly through the preaching faculties of the priest, who preaches, and in that way is actually a father in preaching and instruction and teaching. You scatter the seed abroad, and you see where the Spirit will. It's not up to you. At the end of the day, it's one of the things that actually is encouraging to me as a father and a priest, because like how often do we preach in the church, and how often do we do ministry, and we don't always see the fruits of our labors, right? But we're still called to be faithful to the preaching of the Word, and we're called to be faithful to our ministry, even when we don't necessarily see fruits. And so like for me, especially if I'm starting to get discouraged or beat down, I'm just like, oh, this is fruitless. I'm toiling like Adam at the earth, and nothing's coming out of my ministry, nothing's coming out of this. But then the voice of God the Father reminds me, comes to me like in those silent moments of prayer where he reminds me of, he's like, it's about being faithful. Faithfully sow the Word, faithfully preach the gospel, faithfully live the gospel. He's like, and fruit will come in time. He's like, you be faithful, don't look to be fruitful. Because so often we find like we stop being faithful when we stop seeing the fruits. When we start seeking fruitfulness, we oftentimes abandon faithfulness. Right. Versus I'm called to be faithful, and eventually it doesn't matter if I'm fruitful. If I'm faithful, I will be fruitful. But in that, to me is like the heart of also spiritual fatherhood. And what I've learned from God the Father is I'm called to be faithful. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. I'm called to spread the Word. I'm called to be faithful. And then, likewise, conversely, is that I'm called to receive whatever children God brings to me. Like I receive, like I don't create children, but God sends me children. God sends me and it's the same way that actually, even as a physical father, like right, like the father in physical fatherhood, you spread the seed, right? But it's not you who creates the life, but then they are reciprocated, returned to you by your wife. And then now there's a new relationship in the same way, like God sends me people, oftentimes not the people I'd necessarily want. But there still is an opportunity in that, in encountering and becoming a true father. And it's like that beautiful moment of where you actually start to teach, to instruct, and to not just like tell people what to do. Like, because I don't know about you, but I don't respond very well to people telling me what to do. But I do respond very well to a person being interested in me and being in relationship, which is why, like in that spiritual fatherhood in my ministry, it's like it's journeying with people, it's companioning with people, it's finding friends with people, and being a father who instructs and teaches and guides in relationship.
Yeah. I think too, it's interesting that we live in a time marked maybe as much or more than any other time by fatherlessness, like the wound of our time. And I always think John Paul II, who was a great spiritual father, Pope means papa, it's a word for papa. Pope John Paul II, he talked about original sin, like the first sin back in the Garden of Eden, is an attack on fatherhood. And there's something profound about it. This is the fatherhood of God, that the devil, we're made in the image and likeness of God. God delights in us. I heard this children's telling of the book of Genesis recently. It was so beautiful. And in it, God creates Adam, and he laughs and he says, "You look just like me." Yeah. It's this beautiful kind of like intimacy with my son, made in my image and likeness, that God delights in his son. He delights in us. But original sin is an attack on that, basically like causing us to doubt God's fatherhood, that God is now a tyrant. And that's what the enemy's always doing. He's always attacking our relationship with God the Father and calling it into question. God the Father never stops being our Father, never stops loving us. Praise God for that. But I think about that today, especially we have so many people who are suffering, maybe because of tyrannical fathers, their biological fathers, teachers, sometimes clergy. God have mercy on us, Lord Jesus have mercy on us. Priests that have betrayed their vows or hurt people by their action or inaction. And because of that, so often we turn and kind of rebel against fatherhood. But man, that cuts us off. With the enemy, if we feel fatherless, the enemy has us exactly where he wants us to be. So I think that's another reason why spiritual fatherhood is so important, and our role as priests is so important in this world.
Yeah, and you were asking us of our experience of it too. Some of my experience really does come from having a good father, from having a father that provided for me, that loved me, that was affectionate towards me in a proper way. All of those things. And I can remember hearing, I'm like you. I've never had fanciful things happen to me spiritually, like visions or anything like that. But I have had moments where I've felt like God was saying something to me, or was, giving me a thought or a concept. And so there's been times where I've felt the embrace of God, where I've really felt like that He's embracing me, like my earthly dad did, but in a way that that exceeded it and couldn't, and I couldn't describe it. And just the fatherly care that I've experienced, particularly from God Himself. And so the opportunity to have that relationship with Him and to be able to relate to Him as Father, I mean, I really do that quite a bit. I mean, that really is the way my prayers are kind of directed, is to God as Father, being a provider, a lover of our souls, the one who's always there for us, always seeking us, always wanting us, and how important that is to really know that really is the way, that really is, that concept is a true concept of who God is, and that anything I see on earth is fatherhood comes from the image of God Himself. That fatherhood comes from Him, not from us. We didn't create fatherhood. We didn't think up, this would be a great way to do it. No, we're taking from the truth, the objective truth that's there of what Father is and who Father is. And there's no greater place that we get that than from the prayer itself called Our Father. I mean, there's lots of times I give that as a penance to people, and I'll say, pray through it slowly. And as you're praying through this, think about all the ways in this prayer that God is telling you the type of Father He is to you.
I think that's really, because Jesus' words here are, anyone in authority should read these words and allow our hearts to be shook by it. Am I taking advantage of people by my authority, whether that's parents or a boss or obviously a religious leader, because he's specifically speaking to religious leaders here, or someone who's a teacher. Like, am I putting myself up and putting down others? All those sorts of things are really, really, am I, as he says, making heavy burdens for other people to carry, not lifting a finger. But recognizing that if I'm called father, and I was ordained at 27 years old, you were probably about that age, and
I was 28, 29.
Yeah, and like, so in our 20s, we're ordained, being 90-year-olds calling us father. My dad calling me father.
Yeah.
It's not all the time. He doesn't call me that, like, at home. in the liturgy, he did.
Yeah.
But that should constantly be calling us to, first of all, that I'm a son, and it's because of that I can be a father, and I'm loved as a son, which is amazing. I have a good love, but I need to become more like God the Father. And that to me is such if we're praying, we're praying the Our Father, and we recognize this is what God is like. This is, so Lord, transform me to become more like that. So when people see me, they see Him. And that's really such a beautiful challenge, but mystery that we're involved in, particularly as priests.
Well, and that really is the purpose. To a certain extent of the image that we have, that we're imaging Him in the world. We're imaging God the Father in the world, and how dare we mess that up by not being a good father? Because, like you said, the good side of it is that when we are, it speaks to the beauty of who God is as Father, but when we're not, it detracts from it, and that's the reason why there's so much of a problem. That's the reason why there's such a high call to be a father, a biological father, or a father in that way, and spiritual father as well. But that's also the reason why when abuse happens, what it can do, the damage it can have on a person, on a family, on a society, on a church. We're seeing those damages now just with the abuse crisis and scandals that we've all gone through, and the way people view us. It comes through, and it comes through very clearly, and it hurts. It hurts the children. That's who it hurts. Yeah,
absolutely. So a couple of thoughts, maybe just for us, is in sort of just reflecting on this. Our call as priests. I just want to say a word of encouragement to any young men who are watching this. If you're in love with Jesus Christ and you're figuring out His call for your life, if God's calling you to the priesthood, it's the best. I mean, it really is. It's an amazing call. It's very humbling. It's beautiful. But just to seriously ask that question if the Lord's calling you to this, but also too, maybe something as well for people who aren't priests or aren't going to become priests. Just that thought of it's so easy to be negative towards those in any position of authority, whether it's government or your boss or priests, definitely. And there's teachers. Yeah. There's enough blame to go around. There's enough mistakes to go around. The Pope, your bishop, whatever it might be. But man, I mean, what a difference it makes. And this is something for my own conviction, because my interaction with my own father, my earthly father, who I love, but we have our own areas of struggle, and but also to priests. I've been so blessed by good priests, but do I take time to pray for fathers? Do I take time to pray for priests, and that they can become more like God the Father? Because I think that's such a huge thing. When someone comes up to me and tells me, Father, I know you've been going through this or that, and I've been praying for you. Like, man, that makes such a huge difference for me, that just strengthens me in my life and ministry. Yeah.
I'd also say allowing ourselves to restore, not because He needs to be restored, but to restore our image of the Father in the Old Testament. How often do we hear this which in reality a false dichotomy, a false parallel between the God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament? But like understanding and like pouring through the Scriptures and allowing the understanding of fatherhood to be formed by the God of the Old Testament, who, there's a whole thing on perspective. It's like when you see your father when you're young, you oftentimes don't understand it. And then it's only when you get into your 20s or 30s that you start understanding, oh, okay, that's why
it's tough on me.
Yeah, that's why. And so like also but the same thing is true with the Old Testament, is like how often people have read, even we ourselves possibly have read the Old Testament and have come across this understanding of judging God in the Old Testament. But my favorite line actually in the Old Testament is from Ezekiel, where God points out to Ezekiel, He's like, when the sinner dies for his sin, He's like, but if the sinner is willing to repent, I'm willing to forgive him. On the other hand, if a good person goes from being good to being evil, then I'm going to punish them, and they're going to die because of their sin. And yet you say my ways are not fair. And He's like, are my ways not fair, O Son of Man, but are your ways not fair? Yeah. It's like understanding God as He reveals Himself, not as we project onto him in the Old Testament, because it's the God of the Old Testament who is revealed in fullness in the New Testament.
Right.
And it's
the same God.
It's the same God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the Father. Like Jesus came not to reveal the face of himself. He came to reveal the true face of the Father.
If you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And which is why, like, the Father delights in us. Like, the Father is willing to forgive us stupidly, prodigally, like 70 times 7. As long as we're willing to be humble and as long as we're willing to be honest, He'll take us back and forgive us. So, like, that's not a wrathful God who's throwing lightning bolts. That's the demonic twisting of the Father. Like,
had a good Irish priest used to call it, God's madly in love with you. And that's really what you get from this is God's madly in love with us. God insanely is in love with us.
Stupidly.
Stupidly. Yeah, I mean, he really is the one getting the raw end of the deal here. I mean, it feels that way. But as He lifts us up, I mean, that's where the joy of the Father is. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's the best feeling I get is when someone tells you that there's something you said or something you did, and specifically something you didn't even know you were doing.
Right.
That lifts people up. Man, I mean, that really is a great feeling. And I think you said it a minute ago about prayer. When people tell you they're praying for you, how humble that is. I mean, it's very, it makes you very humble to realize that people love you and think about you. And it also tells you just how important what we're doing is. That people recognize that there's that this isn't easy, and that there's a lot to this, and that they want to support us so much so, that they're willing to take time out of their day just to pray for us. I mean, what a beautiful thing for us as fathers. I mean, as a biological father, it's always nice if somebody comes up to me and tells me that one of my kids have done well, or maybe I've treated my child well, and they've told me, "Oh, you've been a good father for that." As priests, the same thing. The more that people actually encourage us in the things that we're doing well, and can compliment their priests. I would just simply say, pray for your priests, compliment them, be encouraging towards them. I mean, there's so many there's very few that aren't supportive of their priest. But those few can be loud. Those are the ones, those are the voices we hear probably the most, are the people who are upset with us and are discouraged.
We love them too.
We love them too. Absolutely. And we need to hear that.
But the other side as well, if you do have something good to say, man, say it.
Yeah, please say it, because we really do need that. Anytime someone tells me I had a good homily or whatever, I always tell them, thank you for saying that. I really need your encouragement. And just so that they know we appreciate it. Your encouragement's not falling on deaf ears. And there's never been a time when I told my dad that I loved him, or when I thanked him for something that he did for me, that he was like, "Oh, come on, you don't have to do that." Never. He always appreciated that. As a matter of fact, embraced me for it. And so, that really is what we need. But I mean, that's also what we give back to God the Father Himself, to praise Him for His goodness, the way He takes care of us, and the way He loves us.
Absolutely. We started this with the scripture passage from Matthew 23, where it says, "Call no one on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven." And hopefully you understand a little bit more why we call priests father, but you also call your biological dad father as well. That's a participation in the fatherhood of God, and it's one of the great joys that we have as priests to do that. So I'm super grateful for you guys. I can't say enough. I'm so grateful for the priests who have been good fathers to me, good spiritual fathers, especially in confession. Confession is a great place to encounter the fatherhood of God in and through the humanity of the priest. But thank you guys for being good priests, and for everyone watching, for your support for us. All those who are supporting us on Patreon too, we're so grateful to you. If you think about supporting us that way, it would be awesome to have a regular donation in and through the Patreon platform. Also, if you're liking and sharing and subscribing to these videos as well, that helps us get the message out. But Father Doug, Father Tom, I'm Father Michael. Thanks for joining us here at Catholic in America. God bless.